Kate Milifalcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. It's time for our Saturday book, and we are continuing our dive into The Age of Insecurity. This is video number 3 by Astra Taylor, Coming Together as Things Fall Apart. Be sure and check out parts 1 and 2 from last weekend. Now we're going to proceed in this book about the stresses and the feelings of uncertainty and insecurity that we're all feeling, why they exist, and most importantly, what we can do about them. I find this book is very helpful and really encouraging. It's called Cultural Diagnosis, which I think is interesting. And it should be mentioned that this was part of a Canadian Broadcasting series, this book. And so she is speaking with statistics from Canada, and she makes reference to Canadian studies. It makes no difference because the topic is really global. So let's get started. We're on chapter 3, Consumed by Curiosity. So she says that her grandmother was very boho, very hippie. Boho when it was the original, right? She helped to establish a Buddhist outpost in Whitehorse in the Yukon in Canada. Her mother went to an alternative boarding school based on egalitarian principles, anti-authoritarian. So this is where this is her frame of reference growing up. The school was child-centered, democratic, grade-free. There were a lot of schools like that when I was younger, I remember. In the lesson plans, the children's interests were collaborative and open-ended, which is very similar to non-religious homeschooling. They were learning to live in a community and problem solving as a group, and that was part of the lessons. Her mother in 1974 was profoundly marked by these schools in a good way. The ethos of autonomy, curiosity, security. Meanwhile, in 1968, so a couple of years earlier, France was really going through a time. Paris was in chaos. I don't know if everybody remembers that, but student riots. Ronald Inglehart was there. Now we're going to talk about him as an author. He was there for this generational sort of revolution. In 1977, afterwards, he wrote The Silent Revolution, Changing Values and Political Styles Amongst Western Publics. So this is a movement. This is the background from which our book today comes. He talked about generational transformation, remaking society for better, more open-minded society, democratic society, free, more autonomy. And the cause of that was what happened in the 60s and the impact of the social movements of the 60s. I almost feel like a lot of that has been somehow forgotten under this umbrella term of boomer. And your mind now is trained by public opinion, contemporary public opinion, to go to boomers as self-satisfied. They had an early time of it, an easy time of it early on. Things like a home and vacations and the material benefits of American society came easily, that they are or were disconnected from social issues because they were self-satisfied. And, that's really unfair. I have to say, in defense of my fellow boomers, that's a subset. Those are the ones that embrace the 80s greed is good philosophy. And it's not the full scope of boomers. May I remind you, the civil rights movement and the women's movement and the anti-war movement and social justice movements. And this particular kind of education was really common in a certain section of society in that time period. Kids weren't inherently more enlightened or anything. What conditions caused this sort of education? It's because they came out of an egalitarian post-World War II society. It was more secure. There was less economic and physical insecurity. And because of that, they were able to embrace an education of autonomy and democracy and real freedom, not an imposed authoritarian structure. Their basic needs were met, and they assumed it would continue forever into the future. Now, I think it needs to be said, because she's writing from a Canadian point of view, I want to throw this in. This would be for some people, for white middle class people. It's very important to remember that. People tended to be less reactive at that time. They had better wages relative to cost of living. They had more security financially, and they were willing to take chances. She says this echoes Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is, a theory of human motivation, that what makes us tick, our first priority is our material necessities and our economic security. It's hard to think beyond the need for finding money for rent, finding money for insurance, finding money for food, finding money for health care. And when those basics are taken care of, you can start thinking about grand thoughts and big social movements. When those needs are met, we're free to focus on non-material needs for self-actualization. And I really do think that's why today, I think it's a very good point to make, why today we often feel that part of the population is asleep and all they think about is themselves. People carry a lot of economic insecurity and fear about that. And even when they're not in a vulnerable position today, they feel that threat hanging over their heads. I do believe, I'm not making excuses, but I do believe that's an explanation. The generation of the Depression and World War I and World War II, they valued safety and providing a subsistence living. But the younger generation after them, the boomers, they felt materially secure. They took it for granted, and they prioritized autonomy, personal autonomy, and they questioned consumption. So there was a stark generational divide. And if anybody remembers those days at the dinner table, because people ate dinner together every night, at the dinner table, there was always the fight about the length of the hair or the torn jeans or political opinions about war. And, I remember those days very well. The older generation wanted to maintain order. They were all about a strict order, and they were really interested in fighting rising prices. And the younger generation was more into protecting free speech, giving people more say over their political decisions. Liberation was a big word. This was a shift from survival to self-expression, understandable within the context of the social sense of security. In material security, higher needs become priority. You are freed up to think about love and self-esteem, intellectual and aesthetic satisfaction, belonging, purpose. And often people who struggle, because there are always people struggling, people on the lower rungs of the economic ladder will develop contempt for people who are more comfortable financially and who can indulge in Pilates and yoga pants and spa days and such, when there are people working 2 minimum wage jobs and really struggling. And they develop, it creates a divide, and it's the insecurity and a sense of resentment. People in this younger generation had more access to university, and for many, it was not expensive. California had a state university system. It was almost free. It was ridiculously inexpensive, and it was considered the best in the country. That's just one example. People were more open-minded as a rule. There was emergence of movements for peace, for equality, for women, for gays, for indigenous rights, for the environment, all sorts of causes and movements. Security and insecurity have profound cultural, social, political consequences, and they can lead to either progress or reaction. And you can blame insecurity at the very core for a lot of what happens in society. Insecurity can stifle democracy, and if you have security, it can strengthen democracy. Over the years, there's, post-materialist is what they call it, after that security that came after the war. There was a progressive trend. Democracies, the number in the world grew. Prejudices seemed to decrease, although I would argue they were under the surface, and now the surface is being pulled back, and the prejudices that were always harbored are being revealed again, in my opinion. Secularism increased. Religion lost its oomph because people rejected authoritarian structures. But at the millennia, the year 2000 is what they're referring to, everything backslid. Authoritarians and autocrats, the numbers in the world increased. The United States, Hungary, Brazil. And I should throw this in. Pay attention to what's going on in Hungary. Orban lost. But Magyar, the guy that's in his place, is even more of a right-wing extremist. He's making the right noises now, but I think we need to be alert to that. Just a little aside there. Economic scarcity fueled fascism in the 30s. That post-World War I onus that was put on Germany that basically devalued their money and bankrupted the country, the war reparations they had to pay, the lack of aid for the World War I veterans, amongst other things, created a ripe, fertile soil for what came in the 30s. Today, we have lopsided material abundance. The richest 1% have at least 2/3 of the wealth. I think it's more now. This was a few years ago. This book was written in 2023. Most people feel insecure. There are not a lot of people that you can talk to today who feel like, oh, okay, I can relax. Some show more racism. It's reactionary and sexist behavior. Young men, it's kind of horrifying. Insecurity is subjective. You can be possessing a lot and feel insecure. The far right foot soldiers are better off than a lot of people. The ones on January 6th, they were not all poor blue collar from the hollers. When they studied all those people statistically, most of them were middle to upper middle class and professionals. But they often feel vulnerable, and they're often not without reason. Let's look at what the book says. Okay. Contemporary insecurity differs markedly from the insecurity of the past. During the relatively secure conditions of 1928, the Nazis took less than 3% of the vote. And then in 1933, even though it was more secure than you would think, they took far more of the vote. And that's what we're seeing today. Far-right foot soldiers are usually better off than their neighbors, but still feel vulnerable and not without a reason. For example, an analysis of protesters who stormed the U.S. Capitol found that while they tended to be more affluent than average, a disproportionate percentage of participants who were arrested had experienced financial issues in the past, like bankruptcy or unemployment. The insecurity of an unequal and volatile economy tilts some people rightward. So it's not about where you are right now. It's about the sum total of your experience with economic insecurity throughout your life, is what they're saying. Even in Canada, remember she's Canadian, which is often a more conformist country. I think that's interesting. There's increased anxiety and anger. Remember the Freedom Convoy, all the trucks, they were cheered by a third of the population and they were very right wing. Um, those involved were not the poorest, they were not the most oppressed. Insecurity creates an authoritarian reflex because forces pushing it are the products of coordinated attacks on economic and emotional well-being. So let's analyze what that's saying. People feel threatened financially, and this makes them feel unstable emotionally. It causes stress, it causes anger, resentment, and fear. And there are coordinated attacks that create that, which we're going to talk about. But what you end up doing is, because you're insecure or because they feel insecure, they look for a more authoritarian external structure. These coordinated attacks are aimed at privatizing, commodifying the welfare commons, strengthening a market, making society more competitive and individualistic, prioritizing materialism, capitalism, competition. Therefore, we're insecure. We feel we're never enough. We never have enough. Our self-esteem goes down. Our consumerism increases because this fill the void, the need. We feel a need, and it corrupts education as well. Today, there are two conflicting theories of human motivation. The first, as with Maslow, is that material security is seen as the basis for personal and social growth, and increased insecurity is used to keep people compliant, anxious, and striving. Insecurity can go either way. It can shut us down because we have threatened, our egalitarian values are threatened, or it can open us up to social connection and democratic renewal. This is what this book is about: understanding why we're feeling the way we're feeling, looking at the choices of how to react. And we don't have to go down that authoritarian road. In the 1980s, the author lived in a 1960s hippie lifestyle. Her mother's parenting, her school ethos was about autonomy, and she hasn't abandoned that. Her home was chaotic but secure. It wasn't all organized and, controlled, but it was a secure emotional feeling. And she was open to learning and trying, and failing was okay. You could just try again. And she was supported to do exploring intellectually and actually in her life. They were unschoolers, and she mentions a name that I had really forgotten. Time has gone by. He was one of my heroes when I was homeschooling my children. John Holt, who was voted in the 80s as the Teacher of the Year. He was from New York, if I remember correctly. And he believed that learning was driven by children's curiosity. Now, this is not about having no structure, doing nothing, requiring nothing. No, it's not about that. It's about being alert to what interests specific children and using that kernel of curiosity as a jumping off place from which to provide lessons in everything without kids totally realizing that that's what's happening. Of course, kids are pretty smart, they're pretty astute, and they know when they're being played. They understand that, this may pretend to be fun, but it's still schoolwork. And the reality is, but that's a whole other video. We won't get into that today. There's a lot of interesting videos out right now about the state of education and young children, and it's really dismal. I'm so glad my kids are grown. That's all I can say. Anyway, John Holt was a personal hero. I was so excited to hear her mention him. His belief was the human animal is a learning animal, and curiosity is the most powerful motivator. And they talk about Christian homeschoolers who were very lonely, really. I don't know why I have a quote here and I don't remember the context, but it was Red Rover, send Jesus right over. But she finally went to school in the 4th grade, and really found that in that school context, she was always doing the wrong thing. And she learned, she felt all the wrong things. She learned the negative social hierarchies, all about clothes and shoes and who to talk to and who to shun and how to be a mean girl. And the principal explained to her trickle down bullying. You know, people pick on whoever's more vulnerable. The guilt of the whole situation made her stay at school till the end of the year. And her life at home had been so different that the abuse of her peers within the school system felt cruel and bizarre. She couldn't understand the social and economic judging, kids knowing, oh, you're not wearing a particular brand. And she was post-materialist in a survivalist era. She lost a bit of trust in others and in herself. It was a traumatic time for her. But she now knows that our educational and economic systems are designed to make us feel lacking and inadequate. And you know, the reality is, and we won't get into this is a little bit, a tiny bit peripheral to this conversation, is the fact that school really provides childcare. Really, the purpose it serves. Our experience in 2020 certainly highlighted that. It's just how it's evolved, and that's a whole other discussion. 4th grade was her first taste of manufactured insecurity. It keeps us competing and consuming. So she didn't know it at the time, but it was a backlash to her family's counterculture values. It was a right-wing resurgence. Post-materialists didn't notice the growing insecurity that was the material insecurity that was evolving. They were all focused on social inclusion and environmental sustainability instead of the bread and butter concerns of a lot of people who, because they didn't have the luxury to get all metaphysical and philosophical because they were scrambling for survival, physical survival, which pushed them into an embracing of authoritarian structured systems and gave them a sense of materialism. It encourages materialism. Labor and economic security were under assault, and as economic insecurity grew, more people traditionally, they reject the social changes of post-materialists. So what do? You see more nationalism, more patriotism, more social hierarchy viewed as important. All the symbols, you know, everybody dresses the same in the cutout outfits, type lycra type cutout outfits, because you're signaling something when you do that. Big business and political conservatism took hold. They capitalized on these anxieties. And these people are not stupid. They recognize what's going on and they augment it. And it was against racial groups, non-Christians, LGBTQ, women, the vulnerable. And they passed laws that made people more unhappy, more miserable. In the 1960s, the social movements became scapegoats. All those social justice issues became scapegoats. The white working class resented being forced to be open-minded because fear. It's all fear. Minorities, women, gays, academics bear the brunt. The real culprits, which nobody recognizes because the real culprits are manufacturing the situation and distracting from the fact that they're manufacturing the situation. It's cutthroat capitalism and corporate globalism, the people united, right? Thatcher, Reagan, they got put in power. Total examples of what she's talking about. They remade the global economy and they influenced the mainstream. It's been so long since I've read this. This is almost like a new thing to me. Thatcher put it this way in 81. Quote, what's irritated me about the whole direction of politics in the last 30 years is it has always been toward the collective society. People have forgotten about the personal society. By changing economic doctrine, the Prime Minister explained people's priorities and outlooks could be reoriented. Economics are the method. The object is to change the heart and soul, she said. Her goal, bluntly put, was to use policy to manufacture in order to nudge the public rightward. Instead of looking for help from government programs or joining a labor union and working together to collectively bargain for better treatment, citizens were encouraged to go it alone. She claims that there's no such thing as society. This is what Margaret Thatcher said, and she and Reagan were. There's no such thing as society, only isolated men and women and families whose foremost duty was to look after themselves. Thatcher's version of individualism, which involved shrinking the social safety net and weakening organized labor, left people even more atomized, scrambling, insecure. Governments deregulated, they privatized, they lowered taxes on the rich, they created a consumer frenzy. Greed is good was the motto. Freedom was access to stuff. They wanted to do nothing to do with the welfare commons. Striving became insurance against risk. Work harder, clamber up that ladder. Education was sold as a pathway to mobility. Education wasn't pushed for the value of being educated. Education was regarded as a tool to get rich, get a better job, be higher on the hierarchical level. Competition was valued. Buying new stuff all the time was a means of self-expression. Wealth got concentrated at the top, but the rest of us had credit, not cash. We were taught to value objects and to seek status through stuff. And she said this is what she learned going to a regular school in the 4th grade. People love stuff. The oldest jewelry that has been found is from Morocco. It was 150,000 years old. People like nice things, bright, shiny objects. This is consumption, not just for utility, but for pleasure. And then there's consumption for the feelings of inadequacy that can't be soothed, filling that void with things. Then she uses the example of the potlatch, which was I'm sure it still is, native tradition, and I think it's most common in the Pacific Northwest of the United States and Canada. And it's people get together, groups of people get together, and they bring gifts. And it's about having status by giving, not getting. Capitalist consumption is rooted in insecurity. And she says consumption is a wasting disease. I like that. In the 6th century BC, Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu warned, fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Chase after money and security and your heart will never unclench. Around the same time, the rise of Buddhism called attention to the suffering caused by desire, describing a realm of hungry ghosts condemned to an eternity of insatiable longing for food or things. Soon, Plato linked excessive consumption to immorality, arguing in the Republic that rulers of a just society must be indigent, owning no property whatsoever if they were to truly serve the common good. Oh my God, I bet that's popular in the halls of Congress. The 15th century worried about emulative spending, moral panic. Women were fined for excesses in apparel above their station. What was that called? Consumptuary laws? Sumptuary laws. they recognize the moral implications of performative consumption, I guess I would call it. Commerce is nothing new. I mean, that's how we get by. But capitalism turned the possibility of commerce into the necessity of competitive production and consumption in search of self-esteem. In other words, look at me, I can afford stuff. The idea that getting is worth the toil is a deception and a useful fallacy that propels capitalism. It's a ruse to keep the industry of mankind in perpetual motion. Keep making money for the rich people. They like that. Economic growth depends on this lie of the importance of production and consumption. Wealth is a curse. It coexists with insecurity. Real happiness is the ease of body. That's the Maslow thing, meet your basic needs, and the peace of mind. Be free to anyone. It is free to anyone, anywhere, at all times. Beyond a baseline of material security, like enough to eat, shelter over your head, clothes on your back, a higher wealth has diminishing emotional returns. We all say it all the time. When is enough money enough? There can never, if you're a billionaire, you could never have enough. And you spend all of your time in the drive for more. Phenomenal. The system is a lie. And even the winners stay miserable, the billionaires, but we're urged to keep driving the wheels of commercial society. J.K. Galbraith, Cheaper by the Dozen? That's his family. He, in 1958, wrote The Affluent Society. He said people live in luxury, but they're starved of public good. Advertising created this artificial want, need, insecurity. Who was the nephew of Freud? Was the original ad man. I can't remember his name, but might want to look that up. I should probably make a video about him. Okay, here we go. This is coming from Galbraith. The modern corporation must manufacture not only goods, but the desire for the goods it manufactures. Packard quoted a leading businessman speaking at an apparel. Packard is another guy for whom consumerism is a dirty word. He quoted a leading businessman speaking to an apparel industry conference. Quote, "It's our job to make women unhappy with what they have," the executive said. "We must make them so unhappy that their husbands can find no happiness or peace in their excessive savings. The challenge was persuading people to keep buying even though their closets and bellies are full." It's just bleak. They want you to toss away the used, the old, the passé. And today that would be technology. How many times can they improve the iPhone? Little rebellion. I will not buy an iPhone. I have an iPad because somebody gave it to me. I will not buy an iPhone. No phone is worth more than $800. Are you kidding me? I'm not saying that it's worth $800. No phone is worth nearly the amount of money that they charge for those stupid phones. Oh, looky here. My next little section. The nephew of Freud, Edward Bernays, in the Depression, he made ads that were simple. Bread sold here. But then he realized that if ads were tapping into our insecurity, you could call it public relations. And he started the whole grabbing consumers by making ads that played on people's desires and insecurity and sense of competition. In 2025, global ads made cost more than $1 trillion. The money spent on them was enough money to end world hunger. This is manufacturing insecurity to keep consumption, the treadmill of consumption running. Algorithms, personal ads, they trap us in a filter bubble. You'll notice that on the internet. It's kind of incredible. Public relations is about that, the business of public relations is about hyping ads, not the truth. And our communications online, our news is designed to bring ads to our eyes. It's not about giving you information that's factual about what's happening in the world. It's about grabbing your attention so they can sell things in the ads. And it's all optimized for insecurity. Disinformation about what you own so you'll own something different, body shaming, feeling bad about yourself, feeling bad about others, or feeling that you're not meeting up to the expectation of others, so buy this, buy that. Power is programmed in algorithms. Affluent white people see more content on good jobs, safe houses. It's all programmed to who's looking at it. African Americans see ads about subprime lenders, overpriced insurance, or political ads. Stay home on election day, they're told. Older people see more scams and more fear mongering to push them towards authoritarianism. Okay, let's see here. Data brokers segment internet users into categories. This is really interesting. So these are the categories: the established elite, power couples, just sailing along on one side. On the other side, rural and barely making it, probably bipolar. This is actually a category. Gullible elderly, I beg your pardon, and zero mobility. And this enables advertisers to target the groups accordingly. The aim is to know which vulnerabilities to target and the most effective time to do so. There are, in the ghastly words of one firm, prime vulnerability moments for brands to seize. For instance, when a woman feels the most insecure about her body and overall appearance, that's a targeted time. Or in the no-nonsense summary of Adweek magazine, women feel ugliest on Mondays and weekends. Oh my God. Okay, hold on. I don't know why I'm laughing. I guess if you don't laugh, you cry. That's just unbelievable. TikTok rapidly surfaced videos about body image, mental health, self-harm, eating disorders to accounts associated with 13-year-olds. They appeared in some cases every 39 seconds. This is testimony before Congress. I believe that Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy. This is a whistleblower, former product manager for Facebook. Where am I here? People are steeped in consumer culture. They feel physically worse, more ailments, because of the I can't even say this with a straight face. The global wellness industry, and that garners more than $1.5 trillion, and it's growing. Alternative life choices are marketed. Superfoods, supplements, journaling, yoga, but it all comes for a price. This began with the counterculture with social welfare in mind, but now it's stripped of the progressive social critiques and the compassion. For example, Brené Brown, she never says capitalism. I don't know who this is. I've heard her name, but I've never read her. So we deserve more than coping skills. We need political strategies, according to this author, Astra Taylor. She laments a culture of scarcity that drives overconsumption and insecurity, and talks about how to deal with feelings, authenticity, creativity. How about, changing the system that assaults our self-worth? There's a thought. What if we stop excessive spending by the wealthy and stop the private jets, for example? Limit personal property. Outlaw planned obsolescence, the disposable culture. There's some horrible statistics about clothing that is, constantly going through style changes. Spring collection, summer collection, come on. The refashioned hippie, Maggie Weber. I had her on about 2 weeks ago. If you haven't seen that video, I would recommend it because she's hilarious. But underlying all of her videos is a sense of social justice and activism. She is wonderful. Check her out, the refashioned hippie, Maggie Weber. How about we make products fixable? She calls this movement the right to repair. Remember shoe stores shoe menders, cobblers, shoe fixers, excuse me, shoe repair stores. And emotionally besieging ads that create a sense of enoughness. Stop disinformation and dampen the authoritarian reflex. The pandemic led many down the wellness to conspiracy far-right pipeline. Fear-mongering, racism, all of that stuff grew. Rolling Stone had an article, Meet the Girl Boss. This is about wellness, influencers. It talks about the Canadian trucker convoy. This might be an article I think she's recommending. It's been a while since I've read this, but I think that this is an article about the minimum information types, bringing together the wellness influencers and the Canadian trucker convoy. So that sounds interesting. So we're being manipulated. We're being led down a rabbit hole of confirmation bias dressed up as research. When you read that research is supporting something, dig a little deeper and look into who's funding the research. Curiosity, security, insecurity, they all come from cura, the Latin, worry, the words do, insecurity, curiosity, security, all come from that Latin word cura, which is about worry, care, attention, and study. Insecurity is about being unsure, but you need some curiosity and creativity to be open to things in the world. So what she's saying is there's a balance between care, concern, interest, and going over, tilting into the more pathological fear and insecurity. Fundamentalists and dogmatists hate radical openness. They hate curiosity. They don't like to ask why. Authoritarians tend to really dislike and feel very uncomfortable around uncertainty. The certainty of authoritarianism is the antithesis of curiosity. Certainty makes people shut down. It's an escape from the insecurity of not knowing. There's a rejection of not having answers. They really need to have answers, and they need them coming externally because they don't know that they have that within them. If they look, there's a rigidness, a brittleness, being closed off. In the 1960s, the drive to expand access to university education really grew. Between 50 and 1965, access to education doubled in the United States, twice as much as West Germany, 3 times as in France. Canada, men were twice as likely to go to college, and women were 3 times as likely. Tuition was nominal or non-existent. 80% of freshmen said it's essential to develop a meaningful philosophy of life. I can't imagine an 18-year-old saying that today. I mean, I'm sure they do somewhere, but I just don't see it as a huge, all-prevailing sensibility. 45% looked for financial success. They didn't look at university as career training. They looked at it as self-actualization. 2 decades later, the values are reversed. The 80s goal was to make education back into a structured thing. Jobs were stagnating, and therefore a degree did provide increased wage opportunities. Public education funding went down, tuition went up, corrupted attitudes toward education prevailed, and education became a prestige commodity, and debt. Education equaled debt. Carl Sagan talked about the death of curiosity between kindergarten and 12th grade. When he spoke about 12th graders, he said kindergartners, they were just open and enthusiastic. They asked questions like, what's the birthday of the world? And why is the moon round? And you get to the 12th grade, and he says the kids have become leaden and incurious, unable or unwilling to engage. Something terrible has happened between kindergarten and the 12th grade. And it's not just puberty. He says it's the death of curiosity. She felt that economic social insecurity had a role here, and she went to a high school and saw exactly what Sagan said. School taught kids to hate learning. And this aversion took a range of forms: the status-hungry striving of the high achievers, the bland disinterest of the tuned out, and the overt anti-intellectualism that made nerd a favored pejorative. She fit in because grunge was around when she went to school, and that helped. But autocratic structures only stayed because of fear of the future, fear of unemployment, unemployability. People felt they needed university to get ahead and to survive financially. It wasn't because they were curious about the world. The school system uses a carrot and a stick. The stick is the fear. You learn under duress. Education is a defense to avoid penalties. Learning is associated with shame and fear. The carrot is praise. You get praise for your diligence, your GPA, not for your thinking. There's a difference. The better that she did in school, because she went back to high school when she was older. The more she pleased others, she said, the more insecure she felt. And it was the pursuit of extrinsic knowledge. She felt disconnected from intrinsic motivation and interests. In psychology, this is called contingent versus the secure, basing self-esteem on externals. She had a fear of making mistakes. She was reluctant to get in trouble. She was all about the whole GPA thing. And she said, this is the death of the authentic learning. It requires generative insecurity to be like this. She saw the carrot and the stick were applied unfairly. By her second year in high school, she felt she was on the gifted track. She saw in those gifted classes smaller, whiter, and more affluent classrooms. Most of the minority students and the poor white students were labeled average or remedial, and they were warehoused. Knowledge, she said, is not a limited resource, but it seemed like it was an opportunity that was in short supply. What would public education look like if it relied on generative insecurity and it turned that into curiosity and did not use carrots and sticks? So she says that one of the things that we can do is, and this is at the moment conceptual, this is obviously not happening, but having an education system that's public, paid by the state, universal, reparative, and free, all the way up, that cultivates curiosity and leads to security because of it. She discusses residential schools as tools of colonizing, genocide, racism, and religious indoctrination. And they were used to destroy indigenous culture and hope. And if that's what this quote is, I don't think I need to go into it because I think we're well aware of it at this point. At least I like to believe we're well aware of it. The secure, loving, and respectful environment many indigenous parents created for the children was regarded as a barrier to cultural and religious assimilation and a threat to the brutal and defensive settler security that colonialism instills. And it's one they attempted to demolish by removing indigenous children from their homes. It's just very upsetting. I can't. Let's see here. Canadian First Nations, this was a real bad issue, still is. First Nations are calling for a return to Native-led education for Natives based on traditional methods. They had been taught by the oppressor, and progress was almost non-existent. 10 years ago, the Indigenous job fair was all military and low-wage multinational corporate jobs like McDonald's. Northern Canada's Native culture demands cooperation for survival, all because of the environment. It's all about relationships. It's a culture storytelling, which is an educational technique. Education combined with entertainment sparks curiosity and a desire to know more. Many Native educational traditions are a compassionate web of interdependent relationships. They're communal and individualistic. They're collaborative, not competitive. They personalize understanding with lived experience. It's okay to not know everything. It's a chance to gain insight. I'm looking to see, okay. Her grandmother died. She was a Buddhist, and she always said that desire is endemic to our species, our condition to feel incomplete and interdependent, because we are. How do we respond to this sense of lack, this need for sustenance, security, self-actualization, solidarity, compassion, and care? Dharma, that's how, the righteous way of life. We accept others without expectation of repayment. Societies can mirror this when they come together to ensure material security for all. I'll have one word for you: Finland. History shows the more open-minded, tolerant, and curious prevail. Insecurity goes to dogmatism and rigidity and bigotry. We need to mitigate authoritarian threats, address economic insecurity. The far right focus on policies that increase insecurity because then they can impose control, because then people will seek out authoritarian leaders. We need to create a baseline of support, create conditions in which people can let go of destructive beliefs, which will use material security, be less coercive, more consensual in our education. That's the end of that chapter. I have to go. I will be back with the next video. So that's the end of video number 3. I hope you're finding this interesting. I love the connection between the boomer hippies of the 60s. She's putting in a good word. I appreciate that. Let me know what you think. Thanks very much for watching Slongafoil Slanja.